Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable of 2024. Lovely to see you all at the beginning of the year. I hope everybody forgave me for not doing one on the first day of people's working year last week. I figured that maybe the first day back was a bit much, but it's nice to see so many people already in the room. We've got nearly 40 of us already kicking off this year, so that's absolutely superb. To those who don't know me, my name's Matthew Baird. I've been recruiting in the social housing space now for 11 and a half years. I set up on my own in 2021, so yeah, nearly 3 years ago now, with the idea of not just trying to recruit differently in terms of actually give feedback, speak to candidates properly, and really understand what people are after, but more to try and give something back. I think a lot of the time agencies, unfortunately, the only focus is the bottom line. And that isn't the same for all, but it's unfortunately true for a lot. And so I set up the Social Housing Roundtable with the idea of trying to change that. This will always be free to attend. And the idea is that we discuss a different topic every week. And we get people who you don't always see at conferences, you don't always have the same voices. And it opens it up to a chat which, judging by feedback we've had over the last couple of years, is authentic, is honest, and really gives people a platform to share true ideas and try and inspire change in a sector which desperately needs change. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Becky Tucker from House of Risk, who is our key speaker for today. Becky and I have known each other probably for a couple of years now, and came on to do the roundtable, first roundtable of 2023. Keep trying to make sure I get my years right. First roundtable of 2023 to talk about the sector risk report and the sector risk in general for what's coming up. So to those who are new, we will do about 15, 20 minutes. I'm not sure how long Becky, I haven't actually asked, 15, 20 minutes of Becky will present. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat during that time. After which it will go to a more open discussion forum. Please feel free to raise hands. You can ask questions. You can just bring in discussion points. However you see it going is absolutely wonderful. But without further ado, I'm going to pass across to Becky to introduce today's topic and to start the presentation. So Becky, over to you.
Thanks ever so much, Matt. So we haven't chatted about it, but I kind of know the drill by now. We've been to a few of these, haven't we? So welcome everybody. So those of you that don't know me, yes, I'm Becky Tucker, and I set up House of Risk. Well, I'm in my second year, which is really, really exciting for me. And we're super busy, which is also really exciting for me. So that's really good. What we do at House of Risk is essentially provide business consultancy services to the housing and higher education sectors. And primarily the housing, when I say those two sectors, and that's because that's my passion. I always say I'm a risk management consultant with a difference, and that is I feel like I'm part of the sector and I'm one of the sector, having worked in it for so long. So as Matt says, we're going to do a bit of what's in the regulator for social housing's sector risk profile for 2023. Again, like Matt, trying to get the years right in my head. And what we're going to do is have a look at the kind of key messages in that. But unlike last year, I've kind of structured our session today slightly differently. And that's probably because over the past year, I've kind of been working an awful lot with people within the sector around managing risk and how we can leverage the messages from the regulator into our organisation. So I'm a bit more proactive with our session today, rather than just regurgitating back the sector risk profile for you. So, I mean, I literally can't believe it's a year ago already that we did one of these last. It was almost to the day that we did this last year. And of course, the sector risk profile came out in November for the 2023 version. Slightly late. So for those of you that follow me on LinkedIn, you'll have noticed my kind of tapping of the desk, waiting and checking each day for it to come out. It finally did. And there were no surprises in there perhaps, but it's always good to see it in writing, and it is my top one document of the year for sure when it comes to risk. So first of all, as promised, we're going to kind of delve into what it says. it's clear that the social housing sector is not in a very different position to this time last year, as we kind of navigate through that kind of dynamic operating environment that we're in, that is certainly challenging and continues to be so. So, you know, I don't have any kind of key messages that are different from that perspective. But as I say, slightly differently to last year, we're going to focus more on a quick summary of the content, if that's okay. And then today I want to focus more on our roles within this, within our organisations, and the value add and impact that we can have on risk culture. So I guess today we're going to explore that kind of multifaceted risk approach that shapes our operational landscape in general. And that's not just the local pressures that we face within our regions and within England, Wales, but also that kind of global current demands that we see that are kind of requiring us to be more agile and adaptive, if that's a word, and kind of with foresight going forward. So I guess, firstly, contending with the kind of continued economic viability.
Just checking, Becky, you haven't done a presentation. There isn't one on the screen or anything. I'm just checking.
No, I'm
Okay.
deliberately not doing one today, Matt. I'm just talking to you, if that's all right.
That's absolutely grand. I'm just checking I haven't missed anything, that's all.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I haven't forgotten to share my screen or anything, but it's a good trigger point. And I guess from the perspective of that kind of economic environment that we see ourselves in, that's about kind of, you know, the lingering effects of Brexit. Yes, we're still talking about that this year. It's no different. You know, where we kind of redefined the trade and labour markets. While our recovery from COVID-19 is ongoing, again, yeah, we're still talking about COVID-19, and that's kind of ramping up again this winter, isn't it? We're seeing increases in that again. So add this to the kind of volatile nature of the global markets, and we find ourselves in, you know, in need of perhaps robust and financial strategies that are more pressing than ever, in my view. Amidst all this, geopolitical tensions also steer our course. So things like the Russia-Ukraine conflict has repercussions far beyond their borders, affecting everything from energy prices to the stability of the international relations and trade agreements. We see all of those as issues within the sector. Inflation, the cost of living, they're two storms hitting the affordability of housing and our operational costs for sure. Rising inflation rates, these, you know, carve into our budgets at the moment, and I'm seeing that significantly within the work that I'm doing within organisations. The financial purse strings are definitely being pulled in all directions. The good news around the rent cap helped with that. And gave us a little bit of certainty to take forward into 24-25 financial year, but still, it's, you know, it's a demanding environment that's requiring us to kind of adapt, but also to innovate, and that's part of what we're going to be talking about shortly, in order to maintain those service levels. So I guess, you know, our commitment to the community extends to our planet as well. I'm seeing lots of conversations around the climate change. You know, it's no longer a distant thunder, but a present downpour, if you look at it from the weather recently anyway, if it's anything to go by. The sector must embrace sustainable practices, just like everybody, not just the sector. So, you know, many of the organisations that I work with are shifting their attention more and more to this topic, which can never be a bad thing in my view, if a little late in the day. Also, just my view. I guess from the sector risk profile, the technological advancements push us into a kind of future that is digital first, and we're seeing, you know, significant changes around technology and the impact that's having within our services and the offering. And that kind of rapid transformation is revolutionising our service delivery, but it's also heightening our cybersecurity risk. And staying ahead means staying connected, yet we need to be protected as well. So a really key risk in the sector risk profile was calling out that kind of cybersecurity piece as well. No surprise there. And then I guess the regulatory evolution, as I like to call it. So the regulatory landscape is definitely changing and moulding to a social, political kind of changes within that, and it's imperative that it's not only comply but lead with governance that's compassionate as well as it is compliant. So as we move through today's session, I guess we'll start to unpack some of these, exploring their sort of interconnections. And then, as Matt says, we'll kind of throw it out to the floor, if you like. So just moving our attention more focused towards the sector risk profile then, as we say, published in November, outlines the most significant risks facing providers in the social housing sector, emphasising the need for boards to manage a variety of complex risks to ensure continued delivery of required outcomes under regulatory standards. So key risks within the document included macroeconomic challenges, the need for substantial investment in homes for quality and safety, labour skills access issues, and counterparty risk again. We saw that one feature quite heavily last year, and that's no surprise for the 2023 version either. So the document highlights operational risks that relate to existing stock and service delivery, emphasizes the importance on maintaining stock quality and tenant safety, and of course data. And data is front and centre again, really understanding what your stock quality is like, and that tenant safety piece is really, really important. Thanks, Matt. That was a good point, actually. I was going to ask if we could circulate the link to the document. And I guess, you know, absolutely working through the document, it covers things like the financial and treasury management challenges, particularly regarding existing and new debt, and the necessity for effective risk management practices. Always good to see, particularly for me in my line of work, and many of you listening today, I know. So boards are encouraged to exercise skill and judgment in handling these risks and make strategic decisions. And there was a lot of talk prior to and within the document around the kind of trade-offs that boards have to make, really understanding, you know, the decisions that we make and, you know, the impacts on the other things. So if we do A, that's going to impact or stop B, for example. So a really key kind of point to raise there in terms of board members. I myself am a board member, and I know that, you know, making those decisions around the board table is incredibly difficult. So more general kind of overview points now, really focusing, I guess, on the essence of the document itself. You know, it marks a decade of thoughtful analysis, strategic guidance since the series came out in 2013, which is really quite shocking. And the regulator's commitment to co-regulatory approach still shines through, which is not to be surprised at, fostering a kind of collaborative environment for addressing the sector's challenges. So in this 11th edition, wow, the document does not shy away from pressing issues that we face today. And first and foremost, it acknowledges that kind of macroeconomic challenge that we talked about just now, and that kind of looming over us as a sector, from that global economic shift to local market pressures. These challenges shape the framework within which we operate. And then investment in that home quality and safety has been underlined as more than a necessity, but also mandate for the future. And that's not just about meeting standards, but also about exceeding them and ensuring the well-being of our residents as well. That thing that we're banding around at the moment is who's behind the door, do we know? So we know what the door is, hopefully, but who's living behind it critically, and particularly around our kind of, you know, communal environments in flats, for example. And the report, you know, spotlights some of the critical issues around labour skills. We're still in that place. As we know, our workforce is the kind of backbone to service delivery, and these expertise in their currency of success. So we really need to kind of, you know, keep a close watchful eye on our skills and labour access. So it also brings to the fore the counterparty risk, as I've mentioned, and that comes with complex financial and service agreements, reminding us of the vigilance required in our partnerships and engagements. that operational risks related to our existing stock and service delivery are underscored too, kind of emphasising the need for continuous improvement and innovation in our processes and systems. That financial and treasury management piece, particularly in the realm of debt, is presented as both a challenge and an opportunity in the sector risk profile, requiring kind of astute management from our finance teams and forward-thinking strategies from our boards. The significance of effective risk management practice is brought to light once again, as we mentioned, and it's call for action for us to define and evolve our risk management frameworks as as robust and as responsive as they can be, and that's part and parcel of the work that I do significantly in the sector, is really understanding your risk frameworks and understanding that you've got a robust process in place. So kind of a quick whistle-stop tour through the risks that the document gives us. And as promised, now I want to just delve in a little bit to the kind of strategies that we can put into place for our risk managers and people that manage risk more generally. You play a pivotal role, in my view, in navigating through this myriad of risks that we've talked about. And so what we're going to do now is just look at some actionable strategies before we hand out to the floor to support you in your organisation, to help you to understand and effectively respond to these challenges. So first up is really kind of understanding the risk landscape, that comprehensive risk assessment process that we need to go through. And for me, there's nothing like tools like the old SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats analysis, to really identify the vulnerabilities in this stuff. I know it's back to basics, but they actually really do work. And presenting them in that format to boards is a really good way to capture the risk and what that actually means in a concise way. And then, thinking about that from a communication perspective, enhancing our communication is really critical. Developing that kind of clear communication channels between you, the board, and operational teams, and regularly, updating everyone on risk landscapes and the potential impacts, mitigation strategies. The more helpful you can be, the more insightful your role will be valued within the organisation as well, which helps us to kind of foster that risk aware culture. So encouraging a culture where risk awareness is integral, and the ways to do this help us to provide training and resources to all of our staff, and to recognise and report on the risks. And this proactive approach is hopefully then going to put into place ways to stop risks from escalating out of control before you've managed them. And with that, getting involved in all areas of your organisation is really critical, especially through your internal control systems. So the more you can strengthen these, the better. Regularly reviewing and updating these controls to ensure that they're effective against emerging risks, such as anything in the sector risk profile that we've talked about, particularly in areas like cybersecurity, where the landscape changes so rapidly, and also things like fraud prevention, where that becomes more dynamic and sophisticated as technology moves on. And then I guess how do we respond to those? So making sure that you're developing dynamic response plans, preparing that kind of flexible approach to the risk. These plans should absolutely be capable of adapting to the changing circumstances, because we see that so frequently, and ensure quick and effective responses to mitigate those impacts. Certainly developing things like KRIs for each of the risks enable us to do that, to kind of be more dynamic within our risk management processes. We need to get sophisticated with the way that we manage risk. Doing that from a more basic viewpoint now is just not going to cut it. We need to be dynamic within that. So things like utilising technology for better risk monitoring and management. So investing in things like risk management softwares where you can, that offer kind of real-time data analysis, trend forecasting, and streamlined reporting. There's nothing wrong with the spreadsheet approach, and I see it everywhere I go. But you do need to question whether it's dynamic enough for your risk landscapes as it stands at the moment. And so many times I see that spreadsheet that's controlled in one place, in one part of the organisation, and therefore not visible or dynamic enough to the risk owners themselves. So that is a real kind of issue with that kind of one-sided approach of the strategic spreadsheet process. And then I guess there's stuff like this. Matt puts us in a fantastic position on a weekly basis. It's quite incredible to be able to kind of collaborate and network with each other and engage us as risk managers in the sector to share best practice and learn from each other as well. I can't tell you how it's helped me over the years. And absolutely attending things like industry forums and workshops to stay updated on the latest trends and solutions is absolutely key in my view. We will also be returning to our National Housing Risk Managers Network next month, so definitely watch out for dates on that one. One of the things that I think I'm seeing more and more of is a tendency for risk management to sit in isolation to that kind of tenant engagement piece. So incorporating that kind of tenant feedback into risk management strategies is going to be a new way forward for us, I think. I rarely see this routinely, but with the new standards, kind of highlighting the need to demonstrate customer influence, and quite right too, understanding tenants' concerns and expectations can provide valuable insights for risk mitigation, and particularly in service delivery and safety. So now is the time to get involved in kind of that customer experience, and identifying things like the complaints and feedback trends can really help you to do that. I just don't see this routinely enough, and I hope to see it as time goes on. And then making sure that you've got robust policies and procedures in place, and regularly reviewing and updating these to really ensure that they're meeting the needs of the risk environment, especially those around health and safety, data protection and financial management. Where scheduled reviews are really helpful. I see good practice around things like annual policy MOTs, which is a really, really great way of doing that, where your whole policy might not be due for review, but you just do a stop and check. Is there any legislation changes this year that's going to impact on this policy, rather than wait for the 3-year cycle like we've historically done. And I don't know about anybody on the call today, but certainly around the stress testing in the organisation. So often I see this in finance teams sitting in isolation from risk teams. So your finance team will be performing stress testing on financial models. Yes, absolutely great, and that assesses that impact to the various risk scenarios that we've talked about. But getting involved in these, and so often I see this done in isolation, will really help your understanding of financial resilience in your organisation and plan for it. And then just coming to kind of the end of this whistle stop tour piece, making sure that you stay up to date with your risk management professional development as well, and where essential coaching resources are used for you to be able to kind of elevate your role. Integrating that kind of risk management into the strategic planning, it needs to be bold and needs to be out there. Championing that risk aware culture is really, really important within your organisation. But most importantly, when you're providing that kind of insight into the organisation, how do you add value? And that's the question you need to ask. So develop and present insightful, data-driven risk reports is really, really important, not just regurgitating the risk register back, but showcasing the clear connections between kind of risk management activities and organisational goals is really, really key. And then I guess just to wrap up on that point then, encouraging innovation within your organisation and making sure that you're utilising new technologies, methodologies and creative problem skills is really key to remain dynamic, and making sure that you've got the right tools in place. And I guess by adopting all these strategies, you can ensure that the role of risk managers is seen as not just essential, but actually strategic driven, and fundamental to the organisation's success and resilience. So that's kind of it for me in terms of that risk piece. And I'm going to kind of throw it out to the floor now, really, and ask you to get involved. What questions have you got that any of us can answer?
Thank you very much, Becky. I'm going to bring Holly in just a second. There's a point in the chat from Gabby Wolferink. Even the most advanced and integrated fancy-looking Excel file that is some program manager's baby, saved and maintained in the most accessible and public location, is downloaded by someone to be guiding decisions weeks after, when the information is already outdated and putting tenants at risk. And I know this is something you and I have talked about, because whilst I run this and I also do the recruitment bit, I'm also obviously co-chair of the board for Spring Housing. And it's something that you and I have talked about in terms of just how up to date your information can be when you're making the, when those are determining risk related decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, from my perspective, what I wouldn't advocate is going and spending, tens of thousands of pounds on a really sophisticated system when, nobody's going to engage with it. So it is critical, I think, that people have access to up-to-date live information. And we can do that in a number of ways. And there are some fantastic systems out there. I have my favourites, and I'm sure people on this call do too. That's not what we're here for, but for me, it's around making sure people have got access to that up-to-date information, and really engaging with it, not feeding the beast. Because I see systems that are way too sophisticated for the culture in itself, but more about I prefer the more simple systems that actually give you the information. It's live, it's up to date, people are engaging with it, they're updating it and making sure it's being used.
Completely agree. There's another point in the chat which I'll come to in a moment, but Honey, I'm going to bring you in.
Thank you, Matt, and Happy New Year, everyone. And great to see you, Becky. And I must say, we did some work at Eldon with Becky, and we created our risk framework. My question is to you, Becky. I know you mentioned about innovation and technology. How do you see AI is changing the housing sector, and what risks, obviously opportunities as well there? How do you see the sector is getting ready for that massive change? That's my first question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Honey, and nice to see you too. Yes, from the perspective of AI, I'm seeing it appearing on risk registers, and actually in the work that I do in the higher ed.
Is it me or have I lost Becky? Becky, we've got you back, Becky.
Am I back again?
You're back again. Welcome back.
Oh, it decided to connect through my iPhone for some reason. Very strange. I don't quite know what's going on.
Oh, I've lost you again. We seem to be having. Give it a sec. I'm glad it wasn't just me. It's always interesting when you don't know whether or not it's your internet or someone else's. But Becky, try again for me. Can't hear you. Now have no audio. See, this is where I wish I knew how to edit a Zoom video so that all of this can be. Let's see if Becky can just sort those bits out. Just while waiting for Becky to just said somebody else arrived in the waiting room. Becky, any joy? At least it didn't drop out during your presentation. Becky, can you hear us? No, I've got nothing. Okay. While I'm letting Becky try and sort a couple of bits out there, yeah, someone suggested maybe turn the phone off. Maybe that will reconnect you. I'm not really sure what's happening there. I think Becky's saying they have. By all means, leave and rejoin if you wish. Maybe that will reconnect it. Lara, do come in.
Yeah, I thought I'd Happy New Year, everyone. It's good to see so many familiar faces. Hi, Gabby. Hi, Maureen. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I wanted to. Hi, Becky. Have you started your audio yet? Yeah.
I think so. Is that it?
Oh,
now?
good. All right, then over to you, Becky. I'll ask my question later.
We'll bring
Thank
Lara
you,
in a
Lara.
moment. I'll leave you to go back to Honey's question. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, folks. I don't know what happened. I've turned my phone off now, so hopefully that won't happen again. Yeah, so just on the AI piece, from Honey's perspective, I absolutely am seeing this enter into risk registers very much so at the moment. And, you know, there are all sorts of challenges around, you know, the AI environment that we're in. Mostly the risks I'm seeing are around that kind of technology space where you know, residents have got access to things like GPT, etc., and they're, you know, really, you know, utilizing that in a new way, which is a new risk to the organisations for sure. And then things like, you know, using it through our technology spaces is fabulous. You know, I'm seeing some amazing technology uses where, you know, we can really enhance our services to residents. So yes, it comes with risk, but it also comes with opportunity. And Honey, you'll know that one of, you know, the very first slides that I ever say about risk at all is that it comes from both the positive and the negative side of risk. So making sure that we're, you know, really you know, understanding that from that perspective for sure. Yeah, Matt, so we had a question.
Yeah, I'll bring Lara in. I'll come back to Tony's point in a minute. Tony, rewrite that for me, buddy. I'm just trying to work out what you're asking there. But Lara, do come in.
Yeah, I wanted to make it's a more of a philosophical point about how we talk about risk. And I'm thinking of things like COVID, cladding, is it rack or whack, you know, dodgy cement in our property. And I think AI is the only one that doesn't fit into my observations. But the point I wanted to make is I feel that generally speaking, where a lot of our work on risk is reacting to something that's already happened as a sector, rather than what I try so hard to do, and it's not easy, is to visualize what is coming along the horizon that we don't know anything about, if you know what I'm saying. Because 4 years ago, if someone had said pandemic, most of us would have said, what's one of those? You know, if someone had said furloughs, I'd never heard the word before. And next thing you know, it's on top of everybody's risk register because it's here, it's right in front of us. And then it was, I can't remember what the other was. We go through those sort of cycles. And this one thing goes to the top of everybody's risk register the day after. And then another thing happens and it goes to the top of the register. And there's a part of me that thinks, should we not be trying to work out what's coming rather than what's already happened and how we're responding to that? I don't know how we do that, but I think AI is a good example of that. It's going to impact on the work we do. It's going to impact on how we interact with our clients, our colleagues, our counterparties. And I think it's by now, most organizations should have some sort of statement on how they use AI, the impact on it. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How are our staff going to use it? And I know the board that I'm on are a bit like, oh, we'll just deal with that later. And I'm like, no, by the time we get to deal with it, it's already in the mix. So I think the challenge for the sector, and I think this applies to most professions, is to try and visualize what's coming over the horizon. So who saw Brexit coming? Well, we had a bit of time. Who saw the war in Russia coming and how that would impact on our electricity bills for our tenants? So it's, how do we visualize the future, really? So I don't have the answer. I just thought I'd ask an interesting question. Over to you, Becky.
Thanks, Lara. I think everything that you say kind of resonates with all of us that manage risk, and that is, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could do that predicting and really, you know, understand what the future looks like? I guess my response to that, though, is don't just report on what's here and now. So when you're horizon scanning, so often I see that actually people are just regurgitating what they see in the housing news. That's not horizon scanning. That's just reporting. And, you know, really understanding the consequences of what we are seeing evolve in front of us and how we can then adapt and move with, you know, agility is really, really key. So the way I look at horizon scanning is very much in kind of 3 tranches, really. And you know, I've developed a model over time that really understands that kind of you know, risk foresight, I like to call it, rather than horizon scanning. And because horizon scanning for me is kind of that middle ground, isn't it? You know, it's the bit that we can see and we interpret. But what about what's beyond that? And that's what I think you're alluding to there, is really understanding what risk looks like beyond the horizon. So we've got, you know, the what's in the news, and we've got the horizon scanning piece, and then we've got that kind of far distance, whatever you want to call that, I don't know. But for me, it's really understanding those three things and the dynamic around those, but also about taking the time out to kind of analyze some of this stuff. So you mentioned AI. You know, let's sit back and you know, do that SWOT analysis that we were talking about, and really understand what AI is trying to do and what it's going to achieve for our organizations, as well as the risks associated with that. And that will pull out all sorts, and you'll start to kind of hopefully use those insights within your organization, because it's the insights, the bits that's really critical, that we use to be able to horizon scan effectively, if that makes sense. No crystal ball, but you know.
I completely agree, and I think there's always going to be the challenge. There's always something new coming, but it's trying, as Lara said, trying to get ahead of it. I think so much of it is how quickly we can adapt. And one of the things I found both brilliant and also maybe a little bit frustrating was how quickly we adapted to the pandemic, and how quickly we adapted to home working and everything that came with it. So we can do it, but sometimes with stuff like AI or whatever, it's who's taking ownership. The pandemic gave us absolutely no choice but to all take ownership and to do something about it. Other things is like, it's almost like fire safety when you come back to Grenfell, right? Who's actually going to take ownership for making sure all of this is sorted? And sometimes there's a bit of passing the buck, or well, the board will deal with it, but the asset team's dealing with it. And we do need to collaborate, but there needs to be that person really taking a forefront for it. I'm seeing a few people wrapping up warm. I'm also noticing I almost want to like turn up the temperature in this room. I don't know why I was thinking that, so I'm sorry if everybody's cold. So I'm going to, there's a point in the chat that I'm going to go to, and then I'm going to bring Edward in. So Gabby, so firstly, Tony said, surely you could ask the AI system itself what the risks are, and that'd be an interesting one to see how that whole thing is. A bit like with Robert Ross, isn't it? Seeing who's going where. And then Gabby Wolfering, in my honest opinion, a big risk is staff sharing confidential information in various AI applications, breaching all sorts of GDPR and other regulations before we even get into the ethics of the thing. Proper staff upskilling to help them make the most of the opportunities without putting the organisation at tenants at risk is much needed.
If I can just add to that, you know, it's the willingness of staff to help, but just something that ChatGPT, for example, is very good at is help you write letters, for example. So say you've got you're dealing with a complaint, or you have to write a very difficult message to a tenant. You have written something, you simply copy paste it, having all the address information, all the names, all the things, and you chuck it into ChatGPT, Copilot, anything that's not connected to your internal safety systems, and that information is out there. And it's the willingness of people to help, but it does put people at risk. And I think that's something that you should harness that enthusiasm of helping people using those tools, but at the same time, it's a slippery slope.
It is, and understanding who owns the data and where that data is being held. Becky, I'll bring you back in 10 seconds. I'm going to go to Edward, and then I'll bring you in. But Edward, thank you for that, Gabby.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks, Matt. Edward Crouch Capita, formerly a housing officer, formerly board member at Worthing Homes down in Sussex. I don't want to take the conversation back, but I think the piece about sort of horizon scanning and understanding, you know, what's coming along is really important. But I think it came up, you know, when I was on the board. It's like, right, you know, what's next? And it does seem that the housing sector is is sort of lurching from, as Lara points out, from Brexit to RAC to condensation damp and mold, and it's like there will be something next, and we know that. And I suppose the word I kind of want to ensure is out there is resilience. And I think a lot of these things have themes. It's kind of flood fire damage, it's financial, it's you could probably break down the risks that affect the housing sector into a relatively neat list. And then I think there's something about, regardless of what it is, you know, because we don't know. I mean, there was someone far more intelligent than me talked about known unknowns and unknown unknowns, Rumsfeld maybe. But I think there's something about, regardless of the category and the detail of the cataclysmic event, it's understanding that to have that resilience and that flexibility within your processes. And I think sometimes, you know, it works if you've got it written down, but if it's out the ordinary, and I think COVID was probably the most out of the ordinary, wasn't it? But ironically, because it was so out of the ordinary, it kind of, there was this sort of wartime spirit, and I think you had a lot of pragmatism. So I think the main thing that I think is really, really key is that piece about resilience and sort of acknowledging that you can't predict and you can't necessarily see over the horizon, but making sure that you've got procedures, policies, documents, staff that are in a mindset that is able to flex and shift, rather than look at a piece of paper and go, oh, this doesn't match, let's have a meeting, and then it, you know, ends up in being a great big long process. So yeah, resilience and flexibility, I think, are my two buzzwords I just want to throw into the mix there. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Becky, I'm going to come back to you before I go to the chat, and then I'll bring in Claire.
Yeah, brilliant. Yes, just on that point, Edward, I think that's absolutely right. So having the mechanisms in place to be able to, really robustly look at risk and understand what the impacts of it are to your organisation, and that for me, it's around the agility. I think what you were describing was that agility. When it comes to risk, and really understanding what that means to the organisation. Can you move dynamically enough, quickly enough to be able to respond? How many IT departments did we, give a round of applause to when it came to their response in COVID times? When I went from organisations where you simply didn't work from home, it wasn't a thing, to everybody working from home overnight. Quite incredible, really. And then I guess from the going back to the AI piece, and really making sure from Gabby's perspective, making sure that you're embedding that within your training to really get people to understand that actually they are breaching data protection regulations. And I can see Claire nodding fervently in the background there. But absolutely, Claire, I'll bring you in, talk to us about that a little bit more.
Thanks, Becky. Yes, absolutely. Nodding furiously at you and at Gabby's comments there as well. And I am pleased to see actually that in this year's risk profile, there is a little bit more about data protection than there ever has been before. It's still not great. It doesn't even mention GDPR. It only says Data Protection Act, which is really weird because the two go hand in hand, but it's a lot better than it was. We are going in the right direction. What I originally wanted to say was picking up on points that you've made and Lara said and Edward as well about, we're always looking at what's coming, what's next. I think what we sometimes miss, because we are always what's next, is what's already going wrong. And you talked about using customer feedback and, the TSM results and that kind of thing. Absolutely. Complaints and everything. That's telling us what is already going wrong, or what is on the edge of going wrong, perhaps. And I feel sometimes we miss those things. We kind of go, AI is coming. Okay, we've got an AI policy next. What's the next thing? When actually we've still got loads of policies that are cumbersome or they're not making sense, the basic policies, and we've still got issues there. And I would urge everyone to have a look at their day-to-day, as well as obviously the horizon scanning. Again, not an easy way to do it. But
we do forget the sector that's under serious pressure. It's a sector that, and it's very interesting actually, that two of the points that came up in the chat, which one from Tony saying the biggest risk coming up is the general election. John Carmichael, the changes in weather patterns and extreme forms of weather should be central on the risk register. There's so many things going on that aren't even on it, that we're going, well, hang on, why aren't those on it? Because then the risk register becomes so large, and I guess it's what they're deeming as in control. But I completely agree with both of these points. It goes back to Claire's point there, which is the sector is also under an awful lot of media scrutiny. And so therefore people are going to be under so much pressure. Stresses are going to rise this year. decisions are going to sometimes be made in environments where people aren't necessarily as calm, relaxed, and have the time they need to really make the decision. Sometimes make a reactive call and make the wrong one. These are going to create more issues. And it's really difficult when we try to look at horizon scanning and what's coming in the future. And exactly as both Claire and Becky have said, because there's so much pressure on us at the moment to get things right and to suddenly fix this sector, which some of it is absolutely the problems that we've caused ourselves. And by that, I mean the sector as a whole, not the people in the room. But also some of it is, been out of our control. I shared a post yesterday, which was really interesting, about just how over the last 15 years funding has been decimated and what went into that. And at times we need to give ourselves a break, but equally you can't afford to take your foot off the gas. And I think that's where Edward's point around resilience comes in, and going, I remember we said this on the roundtable last year, Becky, almost like you say, almost to the year, that 2023 was going to be a really, really difficult year for the sector. I don't think 2024 is unfortunately going to be any easier. If anything, it's going to get more difficult. And I think we're going to get a lot of promises made, maybe by an outgoing government who know they can't deliver on them. And then the next government coming going, well, there isn't the money to do it. And I found it very refreshing to hear the Housing Summit last year, the leader of the opposition come in and say, the NatFed was saying we need 80,000 homes a year, and they just said there isn't the money, we can't deliver it. Like we can't do it. And that was quite refreshing to at least hear an honest opinion on that, rather than going, oh well, we'll try and do X, Y, Z. But as you say, I mean, when Michelle's put in the chat there, when employees are stressed and overworked, the risk to cybersecurity increases. Research on single event or training session rarely works. There needs to be a series of training and frequent but irregularly spaced campaigns with enough novelty to engage staff. And I know there's a lot of consultants in this room who will know that, and then tear their hair out, and Becky, I imagine you're one of them, that quite often when things are going wrong, people still don't go to training as the first course of action to try and repair a solution. It's somewhere down about 6th or 7th. It's, oh, well, maybe it's the staff aren't doing things correctly, or maybe no one's following policy or whatever, rather than going, actually, do we just know how to fix this? And I don't know what your thoughts are around any of those points, Becky.
Yeah, just on that last point, really. Most recently, I was approached by an organisation that wanted to do a bit of simple horizon scanning discussions. So basically looking at the risks and how they impacted on their organisation. And it's the first time that somebody's actually put their hand up proactively and said, we just want to talk about the environment, what's going on out there? How is it going to impact on us as an organisation? And it was an incredible session, because you're getting like-minded people in a room talking about a more general approach to risks within the sector. I think what resonated with me was what Claire was saying around, we bounce actually from one risk to another, and we put all of our attention to that one risk. So things like, damp and mold is a brilliant example of that. How many business plan objectives went out the window because of the response that was required for damp and mold? And that's just one example of how we kind of bounce from one risk to another without having the ability to kind of really be able to understand the entire landscape and its interrelationships and interdependencies on each other.
I think a lot of that comes back to your complaints handling and actually listening to your frontline housing officers, listening to your staff and going, right, what are the problems out there? Because it wasn't like damp and mold wasn't an issue for 10, 15, 20 years and then suddenly became a nightmare in 6 months. It was, oh, right, well, now we need to respond to this, but we've been able to ignore it and put it on the back burner for a while. And I'm not saying people did ignore it, but that certainly seemed to be the perception from outside of the sector. And that is so important when we're in a sector that's desperately trying to recruit staff and hire staff to come and work within it, as we're losing staff week in, week out at the moment to private sector or to go and become consultants. And it's frustrating when so many brilliant people are burning out and having to leave it, when actually I was talking to somebody just yesterday who said that for years they've been a director of housing and were trying to influence change at almost a more exec level and couldn't really get listened to until they became a consultant and quit, and now suddenly they're being paid to say the same things and are heard more. Yeah. And it's just wild. I'm just going to jump back to the chat for a minute because I'm aware we're going into the last kind of 5-10 minutes. So Mariana said, which AI system is most useful for the housing industry? Can colleagues recommend any? Gabby's mentioned look into likes of Microsoft Copilot for businesses, which allows staff to feed it documents and information safely to generate information and output, anything that can be boxed into your system and own government. Yana said the Grenfell Phase 2 report will also create much activity. I don't know when that's due out, but that will definitely be something which, again, I mean, you talk about that, Becky, a reactive thing. I imagine suddenly fire safety will be number one on everybody's thing to deal with immediately. Simon Jones, the risk of saying lurching from one risk to another frames the problems in a way that says we have fixed something and moved on. Couldn't agree more. Claire's agreed. I believe we are sometimes giving boards the idea we've fixed the risk and moved on when all we've done is identified it and started to work on it. Mataza, the risk surrounding councils going bankrupt, absolutely huge. Will this still continue, or will the government increase public spending after the election? I can't see it happening unless there are huge changes, but I certainly know, I mean, I live in Birmingham. Obviously, that was the first big one to go bump. It certainly isn't the last from a lot of people that I'm speaking with, and that's going to have a huge, huge impact. Karen said that with regards to the environment, decisions being made, those responsible for strategy getting drawn into operations to get things right is key. And then Gabby said, but that's a lifestyle problem. Exactly, Gabby, it isn't. We have so much odd narrative coming from central government at the moment. And then Claire said, damper mold was always there. We were just talking about it as a lifestyle issue, backed up by Tony saying they're part of asset management, so it becomes a part of departmental and organizational risk. Yanis said that the second Grenfell report is due out in June, so that will skew everybody's second half of the year, never mind what's happening with rents, etc. Becky, I'm aware we're going into kind of 5 minutes left, because I know a few people have got 12 o'clocks and things along those lines. Where do people, or I guess I always want the social housing roundtable to be a place where people can take away something on day one or on the event itself and go, right, this is where I start. Where do people start with this? Because I think the one thing that's clear is the risk report's gone, right, yeah, manage this. But actually, as soon as you deep dive into any little bit, it's almost a huge area unto itself.
Yeah, so I agree completely. And one of the things that I recommend organisations to do is go back to those basic tools. And things like the SWOT analysis that I talked about earlier is a really quick, on a page way to do that. So take each of the key headlines from the sector risk profile and do your SWOT analysis on each of those. How is that going to impact on us as an organisation? And that's great. If it's not going to impact on your organisation because it's not relevant, great. That's a tick in the box. But actually, there are many, many things in that report that will. And then, think about that horizon scanning piece in the way that I was describing earlier. Don't think about it as, what's in the future, but take the here and the now, take the what's in the future, and then strategize beyond that in those kind of three-pronged approaches is really key. So I suppose the key takeaways for me are, if you manage risk in your organization, get involved in everything and anything. Don't forget to listen to your customers with that risk piece as well. There are so many indicators in your organization that tell you the performance of your customer relations and how they're feeling, and how that can then be embedded in your key risk indicators, in your risk registers. And then that final piece for me is around making sure that you're being nosy. You get involved in what's going on in your organization, because so much actually is going on that you're not invited to or called into, but you need to be, because risk is not necessarily on the forefront of people's minds. Just invite yourself would be my take on that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's really interesting when you were saying that. It reminded me of an analogy I brought up when I was at the CIH Southwest conference last year. Rick Blakeway from the Ombudsman turned around and said, if we can find the data stream that runs through and we can find where the problem started and who's ignored it, then you should be able to too. And it's exactly that. And that's when if you are involved with risk, deep dive, because that is literally, your responsibility. Becky, what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they've got any follow-ups or if they'd like to get involved, get you involved with their business?
Yeah, great. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm active on there. I've got a website, so you can find me at houseofrisk.co.uk. Yeah, contact details are there, and I'd love to speak to people.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who could attend today. We've had more than 60 people join us on the roundtable today, which is an amazing start to 2024. If you'd like to get involved, this link will work for you every week. So I've tried to make a change this year. We're going to see how that plays out. If it does go into nightmare, then I'll work that out later. But I'm hoping this year it will save you all having to register week in, week out for a different event. Next week, we've got Heather Matuoso coming on to talk about hoarding and the issues around hoarding. And then the following week, Dr. Hannah Absalom is coming on to talk about psychologically informed approaches. So as ever, a really broad stretch, which will be through the roundtable this year. If you'd like to get involved, please reach out. We're still looking for speakers from we've filled kind of Q1, so we're on to Q2, Q3, etc. But a massive thank you to everyone who could join today. Do reach out if you need any recruitment support from my side. But for now, a massive thank you to Becky, and I will see you all at the next event. Cheers.
Bye, Matt.
Thanks all.